You're listening to Served Up, a podcast that features inspiring beverage professionals and topic experts that share their passions through meaningful conversations. I'm your host, Bridget Albert, also known as the Market Fresh Mixologist, an industry mentor with decades of experience. Grab a cocktail and sit back. Let's learn how we can make a positive impact in our industry. Hey, y'all, it's Bridget here. Exciting news. I had the opportunity to chat with Mike Morrison. He is on a mission to build orphanages and hope centers across the globe, providing love, support, and the opportunity to children in need. This is just the beginning of a journey to create a brighter future for thousands of young lives. Every step he takes is towards hope and healing the world where no child is left behind. So sit back, relax, grab yourself your favorite cocktail, and enjoy the show. Mike, welcome to Served Up. I'm really excited to have you on today's show.
Well, I appreciate it, Bridget, and I'm equally excited, and I am grateful for the time that y'all have given me.
Absolutely. Can you tell our listeners a bit about your background, where you're from, and really what brought you into the beverage space?
Yes, certainly. I was born up in Northeast Ohio, in Akron. So LeBron James, me and him, same hospital, I believe. But I moved to Texas, family with the oil boom in the 80s. So I've been in Houston there since 1980, grew up there, and ultimately ended up going to the University of Texas in Austin and really had my sights on law school. So I was graduating there and took the LSAT, going to be moving back to Houston. And I actually started working part-time for Glaziers back then on the weekends. And I would start at 5 a.m. on Saturday and 5 a.m. on Sunday, going to a couple of Sam's Clubs and then to a chain here in Texas called H-E-B. They were getting really big with their flagship stores, and they were starting to demand 7 days a week service. So I was there to give the sales consultants a day off, if you will. So yes, I did that for, I think 6 to 8 months. And then Southern Glaziers actually offered me a job. I believe it was in February or March of that year after I graduated, and I kind of politely declined and told them I was going to be going to law school in August and moving back to Houston. But back then you stocked everything you sold, right? So there was no bench. There was really no merchandisers. And they didn't care. They said, hey, if you're willing to do it, we're willing to have you. So came on board full time, got a sales territory, and have never looked back since. I'm on year 28 now with Southern Glaziers. It's the only job I've had outside of, call it, Foot Locker in the mall, and it's been a great run, and I've enjoyed every bit of it, and excited to be here.
Before we really dive into your passion project, would love to hear about some of the changes, that you've seen in the beverage industry with that nice long 28-year career that you've had.
Yes, it's definitely been interesting from just an organizational standpoint. When I started, I think we were in 4 states with Glaziers. I think there was 1 or 2 human resource partners for those 4 states. And you advance today, and you look at all the advancements that Southern Glaziers has made probably in the last, call it 3 years, probably trumps the previous 25 years, and everything that's been brought to the table, and the tools that we have, technology. It's been the tools that I see now, looking back on how we were doing things in the past. You just can't fathom the differences, right? And the progression that's been made in this industry. And I think one could still make the argument that this industry is behind a lot of the top 500 companies in other industries. So it's a niche industry. It's hard to invest in and make those changes, I think, in such a niche industry with all the research that needs to be done before we pull the trigger. But I've done a little bit of on-premise, off-premise. And ultimately, I think from the sales perspective, things have changed, but they haven't, right? You have so much more tools to go to the table with to present from a data insights perspective, but a lot of it still comes down to the relationships that we build inside the accounts, and we're still going to get a lot of business done that way. So as much as the technology has changed, that relationship piece has stayed the same.
Yeah, I mean, for sure. Like you mentioned HEB, we're out here I'm in Illinois, we've got like Jewel Osco, we have Mariano's, for instance. And still, like, if you don't have those relationships initially or not able to keep them, right? It's still a very human to human business. As much as we like to lean into technology, into AI and, all of the stuff, you still have to be able to show up as a human and build upon those relationships to keep them over the span of the years.
Absolutely. We can have all the technology and all the competitive advantages that we have, and that's fantastic. And it's what sets us apart from our competition. But if we don't have the right people and are educating them and training them, it's a tough spend, right, to not have that. So we have to invest in the people. And as far as nothing changing again, it's still the brick and mortar is the brick and mortar, and the technology is the technology. But ultimately, it's all still driven by people, right? And so all the people are creating this stuff. So it still will always circle back to people as being our biggest competitive advantage and how we develop them.
I agree with you 100%. And I want to, segue just into your passion project, which is really why we are having you on the show today, because you are doing some incredible things outside of your gig here at SGWS. Can you tell us really how you started A Sheltered Life? What was that aha moment that you had in 2012 to dedicate a big portion of your life to helping others?
Yeah, certainly. And thanks for the question here. This is a extremely important project to me, and how it's grown. So, and again, I got invited to go down to Medellin, Colombia. I think the invitation came in October of 2011 from a good friend of mine that I had grown up with and known for years, but hadn't connected with. And I tell you, I did not want to go, right? From our generation, unfortunately, what we think of Medellin, Colombia, all ties back to negativity and danger. And so I didn't want to go. I don't look like a Latino, and I felt like I was at risk, and I have a child, and all the things telling me not to go. But ultimately, I made the decision to go, along with a couple other friends that I grew up with and that were close in my life. And we went down there in January of 2012. And again, I think you go down there going, man, how can I, selfishly help these people that are such need? They really need our help. And it just didn't turn out that way. And the first stop was, 15 men from around the country on the trip. And the first stop was a place called Casa Azul, Blue House. And this amazing woman named Erica was the one that was kind of running it. And she was, I think, call it about 32 years old, 34 years old, had scars on her forearms, from machetes and people, going through that time frame and forcing people out of their house. But she ended up, turning everything into a positive. So she would work for the government inside the city during the days, and then at night go up treacherous roads and really tough to get to places to take care of these kids at Casa Azul. So that was our very first stop, and it just made such a impact on us and me personally, just to looking at kids' eyes, right? I mean, there was probably 30 or 40 children there, ranging from 4 to 12 years old, and happy as can be, didn't need a thing in life, right? They had everything that they needed. They just needed a home, right? They need shelter. But as far as them as people, they shone their light on us versus us showing them. And to be able to look a child in the eyes, and I've got three children of my own, and so do my partners, and know that you could do something and not do something was really, really hard for me to swallow. There's still kids, and that was, 12 years ago now, and there's still kids' faces that are ingrained in my mind that I've never seen again, and it's 12 years later. So that really inspired the thought process of, okay, what are we going to do when we get back? And really, it started off again almost selfishly. It's like, okay, how much does it cost? Okay, we want to try to fund, raise enough money to fund 3 projects and in Medellin, Colombia. And we were going to do it through a fundraising event with, wine and auction. But we were going to be done after that. That was it. We were just going to do that. And we felt like we did our good deed and pack it up and go. And then after the first year and, the response from the people that were in the room that year, and we realized, hey, we have something. I mean, we were told that we weren't going to raise $5,000 or $10,000. And so it was really a blessing to see. We ended up raising, I think, $117,000 in year one with, no sponsors, no anything. And so we realized, like, hey, if we have the means and we have the desire, why are we stopping, here? And so that's how it just kind of evolved, and, lots of discussions and hard work and putting into it and making a decision, because it's definitely affects family life and the amount of time it takes. Because if, we're putting on this event every year in November, and it takes about 6 to 7 months to actually plan out and execute. And we're still 3 guys. We do have an event company that we hired about 6 or 7 years ago, but we basically still do everything from soup to nuts, on it. And, we've wanted to quit at some points, individually, through the years, whether it's just tough times, seasons of life, that kind of stuff. But ultimately, it still comes back to just remembering why you started, what we're doing, and that this is way bigger than us fighting through challenges in life. These kids are fighting through way more than we are. And we have a duty.
Yeah. Can we take it back just a little bit when you talk about the woman that you met in 2011 and she had marks on her arms, and you went to this blue house, which I'm assuming was an orphanage?
It wasn't, the blue house. So it wasn't even that. Like, whenever we think of an orphanage here in the United States, right, you're thinking of this, big building, really nice, lots of rooms and beds and things to do. Here, they had not been funded yet. So they were just staying in this little room. You had to walk up about, maybe 50 to 75 cement stairs. And they were lined on the sides. These kids were lined on the sides of those, waiting for us with a single red rose for each of us. And then we get to their little place, and all it is, the room that I'm sitting in right now, it was about as big as it was. It may be a little bit bigger. Call it a 15 by 20 foot single room. The walls were just, your little gray cinder blocks, right? That you construct with. The roof was a piece of sheet metal with a little boulder sitting on top of it. And the windows were somebody just punched out a couple cinder blocks. And they had some plastic chairs. That's all that existed in this place. But it was a place that these kids could come. They could come lay their head. They could come educate themselves through the people volunteering. So that was eye opening. To know I've got at that time I had a 5-year-old son, and the same age as these kids, and this is their day. And not having a single thing, or not understanding where you may or may not get food from or sleep. And so, that was the first one. And Erica was an amazing woman with no ill will, just forward facing, looking ahead and paving the path for a lot of people around her. And we actually flew her up. I think it was year 2 or 3 to come speak at the event. And man, we talk about a tearjerker. To listen, to a young lady's story like that is impactful.
Can we hear a little bit about, really like the climate in Colombia, what caused those scars on her arms and such a displacement of children, which brings us to such a need, for your organization? Because I think that there's a lot of listeners, Served Up is a global podcast. And so there might be some listeners that aren't really hip whatsoever to the history of Colombia. And I think that would help kind of show the importance of what you're doing overall.
Sure. And just to set the background a little bit again, when we landed in the airport that year in 2012, there was a group of volunteers there waiting to greet us. So they were going to be kind of our host for the 4 days that we were there. And there was this amazingly beautiful woman in the line as they were greeting. And I was smitten from that. So we actually ended up keeping in touch and dating long distance. And so I married that young woman. And so I go back to Colombia usually 2 times a year. Still now. I just got back last Thursday. I just picked up my wife and two girls last night at the DFW airport here at 11 o'clock at night, and get them back to school. But Colombia, obviously the history going back in the 70s and 80s, it was all about the cartels and how dangerous it is on the streets. And they ruled the country, if you will, in a lot of ways. And it really, the people of Colombia are some of the most beautiful people in the world. And so I think a lot of people think that first image, and it's a very hard culture, but it's actually the opposite. So the culture there is amazing. The people are amazing. The landscape is amazing. And not one time I think I've been there probably 25 times now in the past, decade. And not one time has anybody in Colombia ever brought up the name Pablo Escobar or cartels. It's nothing about that. It's a black eye. But as far as the danger back then, obviously, going back to Erica, what happened with her is, the cartel would take over towns, and they came to her. And I can't remember if she was living with her mother or her grandmother, but they basically came through the town and said, notified everybody, going house to house that, hey, you guys need to be out of your house tomorrow. We're going to be basically living here. And I think it was the grandmother. They decided, no way, we're not living. We're not leaving. And they come back the next day, and they basically start pouring gasoline on everything in the house, and including them, and so they're going to light it on fire. So they basically came through with machetes and were forcing them out. So that's her covering herself.
Yeah. And they didn't just do this in her town.
Sure. Yeah. Everybody's got a story, right? And, even my wife from, distant, aunt, I think, lost her life to a car bomb. And so, that's just the reality in any tough spot. I mean, the United States has its tough spots. You look at everything going on in Mexico right now. So these places exist all over the world. And so there is a need, and what they're doing in Colombia. And you look at the transition from the 80s and 90s to where they are now in really a short time frame. I feel completely safe going to visit there. Mm-hmm. The places that we went to visit on that trip, and the volunteers, I mean, they wore no jewelry. They come in, the organization that we were there with, International Cooperating Ministries, I mean, they've got feet on the streets. So they get there and start working things out with the leaders of the community, if you will, mm-hmm. right, to make sure that we're going to be safe and make some concessions but you still, like, going to these places, the people, that's when we knew that we were going to some really tough spots, when our hosts that live there were nervous about going to a lot of these places, because they'd never been to a lot of these places in parts of the city. So it was their first time seeing it as well. So there was a lot of angst in going to some of these places and getting to these remote parts to go see them. But Erica is still involved, and I hope to see her again soon and check in and see how she's doing, because she definitely made an impact of what she's doing, and how much hours that she just has to put into every single day because it's not easy to get up the mountains there, right? The Medellin is in a mountain valley. It's extremely, mountainous and beautiful, but lush, but it's not easy to traverse the city there, especially getting up in the hills.
Yeah. And so when you talk, and thank you so much for sharing her story, because I do think that it helps paint the picture of Colombia, like you said, like where they were and where they are today, and how things have progressed, and how there's always been a beautiful spirit, right? Throughout all of Colombia. And it's the people and their beautiful culture, and that they want to take care of their own. And I think that that's incredibly courageous, bold, and not an easy thing to do, to give up on these kids, right? Especially when you have a tragic story of your own. And so let's speed it up to today and the awesome work that you're doing. How can people get involved? What does the landscape maybe look like today versus your first visit?
Yeah, well, I'll tell you what, tourism back in 2012, I'll start with that. I felt like you could tell I was a tourist going to Medellin, Colombia, and nobody else looked like an American or European there, right? And so you stood out like a sore thumb. You go there now, it is maybe the number one spot to go visit down in South America. So full of tourists going on down there. But the lay of the land, it has definitely changed in a positive way there in the communities, and kind of fast forward. And so with the project, even though we started with the first three projects in Colombia, we we go around now based on need. There's a lot of red tape sometimes you have to get through with our partners, and we don't want to just have the money sitting up waiting for projects to open. So we'll do kind of wherever the need is. If we have somebody, we had a guest speaker from Cambodia one year and their family, and so we made sure that we were able to get some projects done in Cambodia that year. And so we work with some of that, but it's mainly so we have, after all this now, 12 years. And again, it comes down to fundraising one time a year. Anybody can make a donation all throughout the year, but it's usually the first or second week in November. And we get about 300 people in the room, and we have a seated dinner, silent auction, live auction. And that's where we raise the money. So, the actual gifting goes to the two organizations that we support. So one being International Cooperating Ministries with the orphanages, and the other one being a local charity in Northwest Houston, called the Boys and Girls Country. And they take care of about 90 to 100 kids there in need. So there's multiple ways for local people to get involved by coming to the event. And then we've had many that go out there and volunteer at the Boys and Girls Country to help there. And there's actually people that have gone on trips like we have. So there's people that come there and we'll auction off trips to places. I mean, it's not just limited again to Colombia. And so we've sent probably, 12 to 18 people on some of these trips as well, since we started this organization. And so from an orphanage / hope center, we've got 43 up and running around the world. And so
Wow.
Yeah.
Pause, take a breath. 43. That's incredible. Bravo.
Yeah. And it is. And especially, again, I think it starts back to what started as a little bit of a selfish project and having a lot of people help us, but to really say, hey, this isn't about us, And 43, I'd probably say of those, we probably have about 30 of them that are in Latin America, in the Caribbean, and then, Africa and Asia being the remaining places. So, 50 kids, it's about 2,100, kids that have a roof, have a place to sleep, have a place to eat. And we love it. I mean, we're so thankful for all the help that we've gotten over the years. Southern Glazer's been a participant. Lots of our customers donates product or dinners. Our biggest donation every year for auction item is, and I'm really proud to tell this guy's story, so forgive me. His name is Chris Shepard. So he's a James Beard Award-winning chef in Houston, and he's a friend of mine that, as soon as I moved to Houston, has started working in the on-premise division. So our first year, we didn't know if a single soul was going to show up, right? It's 3 guys that are just inviting all their friends and family and just hoping. We're fronting all the money, and we don't know if anybody's going to show up. And so we didn't have any entertainment the first year, but I went to Chris, and he wasn't a James Beard Award-winning chef at this point. And I asked him, I said, hey, here's what we're doing. I think big, and I like big ideas, and I'd like to auction you off, for dinner in somebody's home for 8 people. I'll come, I'll bring the wine, and I'll be the waiter. And he asked me one question. He's like, is it important to you? This is what you're doing. And I said, absolutely. He's like, count me in, and I'll be in every year that you want me to do it. So fast forward, and this guy, I can't remember what year he won the James Beard Award, but he's probably the biggest chef, and I may be speaking with a little bit of bias, in the Southwest in the United States, right? He's been on Jimmy Kimmel. I mean, he's all over the place doing, somethings. And he actually ended up starting his own organization called Southern Smoke. I encourage everybody to look that up. It is based in helping those in the hospitality industry. So they have granted over $13 or $14 million since 2015. So you're talking about the tragedies that happened in Hawaii. You're talking the hurricanes that just happened, talking about COVID, and they grant waiters, operators, money to get through rough times. And they actually are starting a mental health piece as well, because it's one of the biggest issues that goes into the hospitality industry, especially on the restaurant side. So they are moving and shaking. So Southern Smoke Foundation, check them out. But he has gone for, I think, the least that he has gone for is $10,000, and then the most has been at $18,000.
That's incredible.
It's a big number for just dinner for 8 in your home. And so I actually was just in Houston. I landed on Thursday night in Dallas last week, drove to Houston the next morning at 4 a.m. And because we had the dinner that night from the people that bought it last year, and he actually auctioned it off where it was dinner in his home. So it was the first time he opened up his home with his wife, and we had a great time. So yeah, so there's been a lot of help like that to get us to where we are today.
And can you talk about, you mentioned kind of briefly what the donations do, for the kids, but can you get a little more granular on really how your organization is creating change?
Sure. So 2 different conversations there I'll start with the local, with the Boys and Girls Country. So another amazing organization. They have about, I think it's 11 homes on their property. And so I think each one of those take care of 8 kids. You talk about people that sacrifice. The home parents give up their jobs and they come and they are the parents for 8 kids at each of these little casitas, if you will. And so they raise these kids, and it's a short term, all right? They're helping kids that have, their goal is to get them back to their families, and whether it's their parents, their grandparents, but it could be a mother or father that's taking care of them singularly that has a drug issue or is unemployed and is homeless. And so their goal is to really take care of those kids and, get those parents back healthy and the kids back in those homes. So the difference that's being made there, and they've also started a collegiate funding piece as well to take care of these kids after they get going. And you talk about the highlight of our event every year. The Boys and Girls Country was skeptical at the beginning, right? We're asking them to be a one-off, and we asked them to have a child speak or a kid speak at our event. In the first 2 years, they told us no. And then after coming, they said, hey, we think it's a great idea. So it's hard to corral an audience of 300 people, a lot of times. And you talk about when you get a 10 to 15-year-old up there to speak for 5 minutes and tell their story. Wow. You talk about, you can't hear a pin drop, and to share their experience of what they've gone through and what the difference is making in their life. So there's a huge difference that we get to touch and feel a lot with our local partners. And then on the international cooperating ministries, 100% of everything we're doing, goes straight to the field. There's not any administrative cost on our side. And of course, in that organization, they've got an endowment set up where all of their overhead is taken care of. So every dollar that's raised and every dollar that's donated goes directly to the projects. And they work on quality. A lot of people ask us, hey, can we come? We'd like to participate in the building of one. They see things on TV or some stuff. And we're not necessarily, we're looking for stuff that's driving jobs and economies in their country. So, international cooperating ministries, they work with local contractors, and they fund them based on their quality of work. So they kind of have like a rolling 12, rolling 24-month evaluation, on after the build and how the quality is holding up. So they get more profit, if you will, a better price if they're doing quality work. So, but those kids, we don't get to go back to a lot of these places to see them personally, because it takes some effort. Again, working out the danger stuff of it and making sure that it's safe that we can go, because these areas are still the tough areas. And although the perception in a market like Colombia that everything is safe and it's a great country, again, just like whether you're talking any major city in the United States, there's dangerous parts, and that's still where a lot of these things reside. So we've gotten to go back once and just to see kids, and we don't tell them, right? There's a lot. We don't tell them we're the ones that are funding the projects, because again, it's not about us, but just to go visit these kids and just sit with them for a little bit on the one time that we got to do it, and just see their smiles. It keeps the fire burning for you. But the difference that's being made is huge. And again, thankful for everybody that's participated, because we've had, 50 to 60 volunteers from Southern Glazers that show up at the event to help us set up, check out people, check in people. So there's been so much that has been done, from our own employees helping out to our Cheers group, our local Cheers chapter in Houston, always attending, our operations team attending and helping us get and store the product. When I was down there in Houston, I have to go pick up all the donations from them, and they keep me a special spot over there and spot check it for me. So There's a lot of people that are making a difference to that in person, which is ultimately that child and having an opportunity, right? We just have that belief, right? If we get the children right, we've got a shot, right? It's hard to fix us adults more than it is just giving those kids that basic foundation of having a shot at life, right?
Yeah.
Just having a shot at life.
Can you take us, before we talk about directly, what websites to visit and all that good stuff, can you take me to the moment that you were called to participate in this? That aha moment for you personally, would you be willing to share what happened, what opened your heart and your mind and said, I need to do something, and you did it? I think a lot of people that are listening perhaps have had that a calling, to maybe to help somebody, and it might not be on a grand scale like we're talking about starting a whole organization with millions of dollars or hundreds of thousands of dollars, but a lot of times I think we hear a calling and we don't take the action that we're asked to do. So can you maybe talk about that moment for you?
Yeah, for sure. It's a great question. And I think it almost ties to business, right? How many great business ideas do we have, whether it's a project inside the company, whether it's your own entrepreneurial idea, and it's so hard to maybe pull the trigger. And we've had so many people that come to us and say, I want to volunteer, or I want to find an organization. I've been looking to do something and you guys have hit it. So I don't want to make light of it. It is difficult, right? And it was easy to start in some ways because the fuel that you had, again, going back to those kids that you saw, I talked about the Blue House and those children, but we saw 4 or 5 of those, right? So there was multiple kids and multiple experiences that you had during that trip. And so you leave there with the fire. And definitely those kids, again, I talked about it a little bit before, like seeing them and looking them in their eyes and knowing that you could do something, and just walk away and say, not today, not tomorrow, maybe down the road. So we came back, and the good news is we had that fire that was just really hot, right? And we stuck with it. And our initial plan, again, was to raise about $30,000. I was going to do a small wine dinner. The other partner was going to do a crawfish boil, and the other partner was going to do like a little golf thing. And we're each going to try to raise $10,000 or $15,000. And we quickly started to understand the work that it was going to take to execute one versus trying to do 3 in a year. And so we really dedicated the resources then to just focus on one thing, but really the fire after that. So you had the kids light the fire at the beginning to say, we've got to do something. But again, our original plan was just to do the 1 year and just walk away and high five each other, I guess. But really the people that showed up, right, and coming alongside us. And so I remember year 1, not knowing again if we're going to raise a single dollar. And the venue that we held it at, the max capacity was 160 people. And, we were stressing out all the way up, and we ended up with 167 folks in the room. And the silent auction was set up, and we were set to open the doors, I think at 6:30. And at 6:00, you start making lists of people who you think that you can really count on, that maybe your best friends, it could be your family. And you end up not maybe getting those help, and you start personalizing it a little bit. And it's the wrong path to go, right? Because people just don't have the same passion, and that's okay. It's going to be something different for everybody. But you thought, you thought you knew what you could count on. And I remember the first gentleman coming through the door. He was a Southern Glazers employee, been there for many years, has lots of children. And I wasn't expecting him to buy anything. He came on the Southern Glazers table, and, why does he need to make any purchases for wine? And he came before we even opened the doors, and he had me walk him around and kind of tell him what's going on. And there's a buy it now feature where you could just stick your bid on it and you automatically get it, and you're paying like twice the amount of the actual value. And he just, before we even opened, we probably had about 50 items there at the auction. And I think he probably bought 5 of them at buy it now, double the price. And I was like, oh man, wow. Here's a humble guy coming in here that works for Southern Glazers, doesn't need to do anything to buy wine. He has access from suppliers or from senior leaders. And it was the first time that I was like, man, we have a shot at raising money. And ultimately you get these comments, these little things that just percolate throughout the year that you're not expecting from people that you may never even have met before, that keep the fire going. And then we have a job to try our best that we can to inspire and bring some people along in our community, and whether it's our workplace, our friends, our family. And we've picked up several volunteers over the years that have stuck with us and can, continue to help grow. So that fire comes in little ways. We got a donation of a trip to Africa from somebody we don't know, right? And so for a hunt. So things like that come across, and you're just like, man, people I don't know are doing this for us. When I had a hard time, and I'll bash my brother for a little bit. He's 1 year older than me. He lives in Beaumont, which is about an hour and a half outside of Houston. And I was begging him to come to the event. Tickets are $300 to $350 a person. So it's not cheap, but we focus on kind of the high end stuff. And I couldn't get my brother for the first 3 years. And this is where I say, hey, you can go to kind of a bad place and say, what the heck, is going on here? What the heck? I can't even get through to my brother. How am I going to get through to other people if I can't even get my brother at the event? And he finally came on, I don't know, year 4. And it was just like, whoa, I'm his brother, so he knows, all my limitations and faults and that kind of stuff. And so he had no idea that there's this full blown production, of a room that's set up beautifully with flowers and entertainment. And so he's like, Mike, I wish you would have told me about how serious this was. And I was like, what do you mean? I've been trying for 3 or 4 years. Where have you been? And so, you rely on a lot from strangers that come along the path and really offer volunteer time, because the time is the hardest thing to find. It's easier to ask for the money, and it's easier for people to give. But going back to the chef, for him to give 15 hours of his time is a lot to ask. And so those things keep the fire going. But for me, it's still kids, right? I still get choked up talking about the trip, 12 years later. And it's because the seeing these kids' eyes.
Yeah, it's amazing. And I love that you have kept those fires burning throughout, well over a decade. It's really, really incredible. Can you let our listeners know maybe some of the websites to visit?
Sure.
Social handles, all the good stuff. How can we get involved? Where can they find this good work?
Oh, yeah. Thanks for that in question. There's certain things that we're still not great at, right? So social media, we're not great. And shout out to Sophia Monaco for helping us along a lot through touch points here. So appreciate that. But shelteredlife.org is our website. And whenever you go on and click there, we are set up as a 501 LLC. So we don't have and the reason we did that, we're going to go the 3C, but we were not ready to be accountable, right, to the government and everything they ask. Where we already had some projects, and sometimes I think your best partners are the ones that are already really good at what they do, and we don't have to kind of invent something and create something that we didn't really know a lot about. And so that's kind of how we end up partnering with established 501s right now, and said, hey, we can come alongside them, and here's the projects that we're passionate about, and use them and their resources. So shelteredlife.org is ours. And if you do donate, there is a spot to donate on there, or buy tickets to the event if you're here in Texas, or you want to fly in. We'd love to have you. But those two organizations, there's some links for their websites as well, for the Boys and Girls Country. And that's who you would get your tax receipt from, is the Boys and Girls Country there in Hockley, and then International Cooperating Ministry. So we do have our own Instagram page there and our own Facebook that's managed from somebody there. So you could find further details out there by just looking for A Sheltered Life. Did I get that enough?
That. You did. You absolutely did. And I want to thank you for coming on Served Up today, Mike, and really sharing your story and your journey. I do think that it's going to inspire others that are listening to take action. To take action in the places and in the spaces that we know that we can help and make a difference.
I think it's a great call, and I appreciate you having me and taking the time and leading this conversation in such a graceful way. But yeah, I think the call to action is the hardest thing to get past, right? And so it's easy to get straight back into your routine after you hear something that may motivate you, in any aspect of your life, and then you end up not pulling the trigger. So I think it's really important to seize the moment in whatever you're doing, and try to get involved in something that you're passionate about. Just whatever it is. If it's not this, what is it? And because at the end of the day, this is more important than anything that I've really got going on in my life for 50 years, right outside of just taking care of, my own wife and children and stuff like that. And so, whenever you're gone from work or wherever it is, nobody's going to remember, what you did from Monday through Friday, all your life. And so to have something where we could say, hey, there's a difference hopefully being made out there for one kid. Because the fact of the matter is, I think anybody that has a child, if we needed some need and we needed to raise $1 million for your own child, we would do anything that we could just to get them healthy. And there's a plethora of children in need around the world, locally and internationally. And if we all knew those kids personally, we would bend over backwards to do something for them. But I'm saying that there's beauty in helping those that you don't know.
Absolutely. Well, with that said, Mike, I want to wish you just some great health and a lot of peace. Thank you so much for sharing your journey here on Served Up.
Hey, thank you.
Thanks for listening. Served Up is brought to you by Southern Glazers Wine and Spirits. Produced by Zunu.online. Music by We Killed the Lion can be found on Spotify. Make sure to subscribe to be notified of our future Served Up episodes. Cheers.